Welcome, everyone. Really glad to have you all on board. And today we're going to talk about vendor management for value, right? So, how do you drive value within the VMO function? How do you sort of even avoid value erosion when it comes to managing aspects within the VMO well? So, this is kind of the gist of what we're going to cover. And I have with me Matt and Shatakshi, who are going to be sharing really great insights from aspects that we've done and solved for with our clients and with our members. And we're going to share case studies, we're going to share anecdotes, we're going to share examples. So it's all in all going to be a very exciting session. And I'm excited for it and happy to have Matt and Shatakshi on board too. So just getting us started, I'm going to quickly introduce myself. As you can see, my name is Bhanashi. I'm a vice president in the sourcing and vendor management team. And I basically work on all aspects when it comes to driving sourcing and vendor management forward from a functional perspective, as well as with the market intelligence that we have here at Everest Group. So we're doing a lot of work on best practices, ready to use category strategies, toolkits to drive the function forward when it comes to procurement, as well as doing a lot of research across procure tech, AI and procurement, and so on and so forth. That's our bread and butter here. And I have with me Matt and Shatakshi as well. So, Matt, why don't you quickly introduce yourself too first, followed by Shatakshi?
Sure. Hello, everyone. Matt with Everest Group. I work alongside Benny in terms of leading project delivery for vendor management projects that we'll walk through today, as well as contributing to research. Just in terms of my background, I have about 20 years experience in sourcing vendor management. I've been in both sourcing leadership roles, vendor management roles, as well as in prior consulting and analyst roles. So glad to be with everyone and look forward to the session. Satakshi.
Yeah. Thanks, Matt. Hello, all. I'm Satakshi Pandey. I'm senior analyst with the sourcing and vendor management team here at Everest Group. I closely work with Bhanushi and Matt on various and several aspects of vendor management organization. I've worked on procure tech, agent tech, AI use cases in procurement, AI readiness of organizations when it comes to assessing where organizations currently are and helping and supporting our clients navigate this complex sourcing and vendor management landscape. So excited to share various insights with all of you. And I'll hand it over to Banushi now to have us started.
Great. Thank you, Shatakshi and Matt. So, just getting started, I'm going to set the context of what we're going to cover in the next 1 hour. What is the value you're going to get in terms of giving us your time today, right? So, the first thing we're going to talk about is basically why is a VMO, a vendor management organization, at an inflection point today, and what is the way that you can drive value or at least avoid value erosion at this point today. So we're going to be sharing some data and insights in the first section just to set us off and tell you where you are or where your peers are at this point of time. The second thing we're going to cover is talking about how you need to progress, right? So this is the actionable or the meat of the section, right? It's going to share a lot about what your peers are doing. It's going to give you a lot of activities you should be doing and just share a very stepwise approach in terms of how you can sort of go from your current state to your target state, which is moving towards the best in class vendor management organization. And last but not the least, we have a success story or a case in point to share with you. And this is typically talking about how a leading organization has redesigned their VMO in the recent times. So, of course, towards the end, we'll have a Q&A round, but we do answer questions throughout the session as well. We're monitoring the chat on the side. So do drop in your questions on the go. We're happy to address it during the session and as we go along, but we do have 10-15 minutes towards the end, saved for Q&A too. All right. So with that set into place, let's just quickly jump into it, right? So what, firstly, is a VMO and how is it a strategic differentiator for an enterprise? Typically, a VMO is sort of located in the center and working through with procurement, working with business units, and working with other back office support functions as well, right? Like legal, finance, etc. And of course, we're very well connected to the external ecosystem, which is the vendors or the service providers. Now, obvious, right? This is obvious. But what is it that we're trying to say is that a VMO is located in a very strategic position. And what we're meant to do is not just, of course, the performance monitoring aspects of it or the post contracting phase, typically seen as a kind of an operational part of it, just managing the day to day relationship. But it's also moving to the level above, which is the strategic level, thinking about how can you drive innovation with your strategic vendor partners, how can you take them from the day-to-day operational execution to the strategic partnership level, maybe from a CXO relationship, maybe from having those cadences regularly, having those innovation events regularly, and so on and so forth. So that's the kind of goal for us. Of course, not to say that performance management is not important, but what we've seen in leading organizations is that when it comes to your strategic vendors, and this is when I look at the pyramid, right? You have your top tier vendors, which is your strategic vendors. You have your second tier and your routine. You may call it gold, silver, platinum, or whatever it may be in your terminology. But typically, when it comes to strategic vendors, what you want to move is beyond the BAU. It's beyond the table stakes. It's actually moving to the next level. That, okay, BAU is being managed. We're actually looking to the vendor to drive more value. A good example at this point of time, AI, right? AI is really coming into the ecosystem. So organizations are really looking forward to their service providers to actually be able to tell them what it is that they can do with AI to drive more productivity, to drive more efficiencies, and to actually deliver ROI in a measurable fashion, right? 60% of AI contracts are sort of outcome driven. That's the data we're getting from organizations. And this is what we're also looking as sort of an ask from enterprises to their service providers. So a VMO is really key in actually being able to take those relationships, especially with those gold or the platinum, the platinum and the strategic suppliers to that next level. So with that context set into place, what we want to do is get you all interacting to us. I don't see anything coming in the Q&A right now, so please do drop in your questions as it comes along. But typically what we've seen is that despite the stronger contracts and the governance that is in place, value leakage is still happening within organizations when it comes to managing vendors. So why is it that that is happening? Where exactly are VMOs losing control and value today? Just giving you sort of a brief overview. But before that, let's, like I said, jump into the poll. And here is a question that we want to ask to you all, which is around what concerns have you seen your organizations face when it comes to strategic supplier management? So we have this is a multiple choice question. So do select all that apply in this particular case. But we want to see where it is that you're really facing a challenge, right? Is it because of streamlining processes? Is it because of dividing responsibilities between internal stakeholders, or is it innovation? Right? Where is the value? Um, I see the data is moving quite fast, and there's an equal number of responses across a lot of places. So there's no one taking a clear majority at this point. Okay, I think we'll give it another maybe 10 seconds or so. I think we have quite an equal distribution of responses, right? So we have 44% who are saying there's a lack of strategic alignment with suppliers. Similar percentages are saying that there's a difficulty in dividing responsibilities among internal stakeholders, process streamlining, driving innovation. What we see lesser issues around is limited tech leverage, which I find a bit surprising because we have seen that tech offers great value even within the VMO. Some may argue otherwise, but that's just at a mere 15% at this point. All right. What do you think about this, Matt? Do you feel that this is sort of resonating with what you've heard from the market?
Yeah, I would say, in terms of, really aligning the VMO in terms of what the VMO is really structured to do and operationalizing it is definitely a consistent trend that, we typically see clients, helping with in terms of driving those efforts.
Yeah, I agree. In fact, I think our data sort of agrees with this, right? If we move to the next page, what we'll see is that when we ask this question to our clients as well, what we're seeing is that there's kind of an equal division between the 2 points that we're getting from the poll responses here in this webinar, right? So it's again talking about difficulty in dividing responsibilities among internal stakeholders and strategic alignment. And there's also, like I mentioned, a good focus on tech. Many have faced this challenge of limited tech leverage. So that's also a big challenge. And I think to Matt's point, what he made was uh, on the first point as well, right, around difficulty in dividing responsibilities. Typically, we've seen that something as simple as a RACI being set up in terms of what is a VMO responsible for, who are the suppliers that are strategic that the VMO needs to spend their time on. Even those aren't set in many large organizations, which is a big, big challenge at this point of time when we've reached such levels of maturity when it comes to the VMO function. So, key challenge, but I know that we're actively working towards solving it. So, interesting points from the data that we've also seen. Um, if we move sort of to the next page, what we wanted to show you here is that typically, when we're talking about value leakage, we're seeing multiple issues that are arising, right? And it's not just because of internal ownership and accountability, though we are, of course, seeing in the last slide that there were 70% plus people who sort of selected that option in terms of lack of clear ownership of who's doing what within vendor management. But there's also a very big lack of strategic alignment with suppliers. So let me, sort of take you back into history for a second. When we were in the COVID era, the 2020 era, there was an expectation from service providers that they would just be managing or keeping the lights on, right? So there was a business as usual expectation. But now, as we have come to this time, we've come to the time of innovation, to the time of technology, the expectations have risen a lot, right? So enterprises now have very superior expectations from the vendors, whereas at times it feels like vendors are not matching up to that and they're still in the mode of keeping the lights on, which is not making the enterprises happy. Of course, buyers not happy with this because they want more and they want it quickly at this point of time. So there's a certain expectation mismatch, and that gap is really increasing dissatisfaction, and it's increasing year by year. We've been analyzing this data on an annual basis, and it's sort of going up. The trend moves up, right? So without that coordination or without that match, there's not going to be sort of a good amount of alignment with between vendors and buyers. And last but not the least, I'm not going to sort of take Shatakshi's thunder right now because she has a lot to tell you about the technology leverage that VMOs are creating. But tech leverage or lack of tech leverage is creating sort of reduced visibility. There's delayed risk detection. There have been issues that we've seen with a lot of our clients, and this is definitely something that's leading to a lot of value erosion across organization. So I do see that there's a lot of questions that are coming in as well. Just there's one question which was interesting before we move to the next section. Is it on how can you manage the interaction with procurement and sourcing team? So I'll quickly take that because it's sort of linking to what we're talking about in terms of internal ownership and accountability. So what we've seen firstly is that sometimes VMOs are also centralized within procurement, right? Or they're reporting up to procurement. Whereas other times they're sort of centralized within IT or different business units. And then there's a different kind of ownership or different kind of role delineation that comes in. So, whatever that context may be, not sure what it is in your case, but whatever that context may be, what needs to be there is that set role delineation. Sourcing is looking at the point till contracting and kind of consulting and informing the VMO on the way when it comes to the initial part of the process so that they're able to develop the vendor relationship in the first place, whereas they hand it over to the VMO post contracting, right? Very simply put, but that's the gist of it. And every little step in the process needs to be designed in a certain way that sourcing and VMO have that clear role delineation. So that's how we sort of have seen people manage communication. And it's a big change management that sometimes our clients are doing in terms of just rolling out SOPs, rolling out guidelines to the larger sourcing organizations that here, hey, this is what needs to be done, and this is how we need to ensure that we divide roles between us. Big challenge still in the industry, but that's how you sort of put it on paper and roll it out there. All right. So with that, I think what I'll do is I'll hand it over to Matt, and he is going to take you to the what is it that you should be doing to get to the best in class PMO.
Great. Benushi, if we can move to the next slide. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk you through, and thanks, Benushi, for that introduction, which was helpful. We're going to walk through 3 steps that we're going to suggest in terms of how to align with challenges we saw in those survey results, as well as some of the themes that Benushi mentioned. So the first is establishing clear ownership and accountability. So we're going to walk you through all of the key activities that we've defined are critical in terms of the vendor life cycle. One of the note is that many different organizations will align these activities differently, right? There's no right or wrong. Obviously, there are some pros and cons in terms of what the actual vendor management team may do, or where vendor management may occur within the business, and where sourcing procurement type led activities may occur. So we'll walk through that. The second, we'll talk about how to govern strategic suppliers, what type of cadence you should put in place. And then third, we'll talk about technology that we're seeing in the marketplace today, which is becoming, increasingly critical, especially in organizations that have a heavy third-party risk focus, as well as doing performance management activities. And Shatakshi will walk us through that. So we can move to the next slide, please. All right, next slide. Okay, great. So what we're showing here is just a sample illustration in terms of all the key activities that we see across the vendor life cycle. So you'll see how we broke things out into pre-contracting steps, post-contracting steps. One of the things I do want to note, right, is, we talk about market intelligence and benchmarking. One of the key things that Everest Group does, coming from the practitioner side, having been in the industry at other firms, that I've been impressed with just in my 5 months so far here, is the level of depth and proprietary data we have around service providers, infrastructure providers, and doing benchmarking. I know in terms of my prior roles, a lot of lock-in and switching costs in various companies, and going to market for those efforts is not always easy, right? To be able to document requirements, get out in front of a initiative 12, 18, 24 months in advance, to really drive leverage in the negotiation. So that's one of the key areas we identify best in class, and having access to information that we provide our clients is critical. So I just want to mention that in terms of the pre-contracting, post-contracting phase, this is an example of how we worked with a particular client, and we'll walk through the case study of how we align these activities across their organization. We basically did stakeholder interviews and determined that the vendor management function was going to really focus primarily on post-contracting phases, do some demand management activities, but the centralized sourcing and procurement function was really going to drive the traditional sourcing activities, which was market intelligence, category plans, the sourcing strategy itself, gathering requirements, and actually doing the procurement activities, which is typically invoicing, savings reporting, spend analytics, putting the purchase recs in, executing the RFP process, et cetera. This organization did have a separate risk management function, third-party risk team. So you can see in this example, there was some shared ownership over doing initial front-end risk assessments, and supplier monitoring. One of the things I also saw in the, so really, I think in terms of going back to some of those pain points we saw in the survey data, being able to sit down within your organization, identify and say, here's all the key activities that we should be doing within the organization, who has primary ownership, right? So it's very clear in terms of who's on first, second, and third, if we're using a baseball analogy, in the US. So I think that's very helpful to start here, really align these activities, define ownership, and then work to drive maturity across these areas, especially, like I said, with the market intelligence and benchmarking. All right, we can move to the next slide. Here's another example of how the RACI was actually broken down in terms of, in a more detailed format of who's actually responsible, who's accountable, who's consulted, informed. Really driving this alignment across these key activities is really helpful to socialize this across the organization and really bring teams together across disparate parts of the organization to collaborate across the vendor lifecycle. What we find is that when there's gaps in these various functions, it affects the whole downstream and upstream process. So if we're not doing a good job with market data, it's affecting the SLAs that we're negotiating in our contracts, which is then affecting the performance management capability that the vendor management team is often executing, especially as we're moving towards AI and more service-based contracts being really impacted by technology. It's really imperative for organizations to be really structuring those deals properly. Most of the deals we're seeing on the services side are anywhere from 3 to 5 years. And obviously, as AI is accelerating, organizations expecting those contracts to be future-proof and ensure that they have the right SLAs and metrics and incentives that are going to reduce cost and leverage technology while sharing those benefits with the customer itself and the provider. So ensuring all these activities are aligned across the organization will help, ensure, there's no weak links in a chain in terms of driving downstream impacts. We can move to the next slide. So what I'm going to talk about in step 2 is how to govern your suppliers. So we have some suggested cadences in terms of activities you should operationalize, as well as a supplier tiering structure. So we can move to the next slide. So one of the things we typically recommend is, and this is typically based on different, but in terms of a formal vendor management program, it should have some internal operational structure in place in terms of governance. We typically recommend in terms of setting up an executive level forum to at least meet quarterly amongst various executive stakeholders within the organization, led by the VMO, to really identify how the overall health of the program, suggest policy changes, identify where there might be potentially impacts in terms of compliance with the program, and also really measure the effectiveness in terms of how the program is being rolled out, and things that the executive teams can do to help provide support and clear roadblocks as needed to drive awareness. In organizations that do have a heavy third-party risk management component, especially in financial services sector, where we see regulatory requirements, more formal reporting will be put in place to really track open findings across the risk program, policy exceptions, whether business continuity plans exist for vendors, and whether there's any critical vendors that might be missing impactful SLAs that require executive level attention. We'll also see other organizations do internal stakeholder surveys and monitor that data to identify how well the stakeholders are doing in terms of their interactions with the VMO. Operational level to be more of a operational level forum. And this is also really beneficial in organizations where a vendor management team might have a centralized center-led structure where there might be a central team managing specific vendors and then other activities occur within the business. So setting up an operational forum where you can be a conduit to individuals within the organization that may not be in a dedicated vendor management role, but are carrying out vendor management functions, really operates as a way to really review the health of the program, share best practices, and provide them support as needed in terms of providing support and reporting. All right, I think we can move to the next slide. So some of the other things that we'll also identify, and one of the things that we do when we work with our clients on in terms of these programs and rolling out and customizing this, is helping ensure that they have a supplier tiering program in place. Benucci had mentioned earlier, right? Which suppliers do we do what with, and in what cases? But in terms of activities, we typically recommend having um, multiple different cadences in place. Typically, there will be a vendor management policy and procedures put in place to determine a suggested cadence for these activities that we'll talk through as well. But the first step will be operational reviews with your vendors. These are more tactical reviews to track, open items with one another. We still see, lots of emails going back and forth with vendor leads. Trying to hold suppliers accountable to track things. So just having a more formalized operational level structure in place to track items, track whether they're following up on key issues and progress is very helpful. Specifically with the vendor manager typically leading this, and the engagement leader on the vendor side. We'll typically see these sometimes put in as a bi-weekly, weekly, monthly basis, depending on the health of the relationship and where things occur from there. The next step is performance reviews. Performance reviews are more formalized in terms of actually tracking the SLAs in the contract. Going back to some of my earlier comments in terms of the downstream impacts, we often see clients really questioning what SLAs they should have in these critical BPO infrastructure application service contracts, especially with the move to AI. So this is one of the key areas that we help our clients with in terms of tracking, benchmarking around the best SLAs that we see across the industry and deals that are actually executed, and actually identifying in the market and what SLAs clients should be negotiating in their contracts, especially as we move towards technology and AI impacting labors and services in ways it's impacting going forward. Strategic business reviews, and these are all activities in the prior slide, just to clarify, those are more internal facing governance forums. These are forums between the organization itself, your organization, and the vendor. So strategic business reviews would be functional meetings to more at an executive level. Typically, these we occur on typically a cadence of quarterly, could be more frequent depending on the health and what's going on with the relationship, especially if it's a newer relationship, to really track at more of an executive level dashboard status, how things are going with the supplier, any key issues, how innovation's being tracked, whether there's been any SLA misses, risk findings, other things of significant nature that need to be addressed. This can also be used as a tool to really insert vendor management further into some of these one-off conversations that are typically happening between vendors and executives. Obviously the sales channel is doing their best to sell into executives at various organizations, and they're not always bringing the vendor management, sourcing, and procurement folks alongside them. So being able to proactively set up these cadences and really drive ownership of the conversation is very helpful in terms of getting in front of those things, and driving the relationship. And then the last two typically are good hygiene, but typically see these more formalized and regulated functions, especially with the risk program. Just doing basic financial monitoring of suppliers, news monitoring, just to identify from a risk perspective, do I have a critical outsourced relationship here with significant impact to my organization if they were to go out of business or stop performing. So getting early insight into the supplier's financials and health is imperative to stay in front of that and ensure you can take steps proactively in terms of putting contingency plans in place and taking actions for many situations that often take months to years to execute on. And then the continuity plans are really tie into what I just mentioned around financial monitoring. If we need a plan B, what is that plan B? Are we prepared for it? And is it feasible? And are we ready to execute it? If we were needing to transition service quickly or move to another provider.
Yeah.
We also
Actually, in terms of, yeah, just adding a little bit on what we were recently speaking to a client on the business continuity planning aspect. And one of the things that they mentioned was that There's sometimes a need for building scope redundancies for the strategic suppliers and the critical processes they're managing. Of course, not end to end scope redundancy, but at least some part of it, so that when a situation arises, you do have a backup in place. Not to say that we can do it for everything, right? We have our local vendors, regional vendors, that maybe there's sort of only one vendor you can contract with. But in some cases, when the process is critical, you know that there will be a big chance of failure. There is a good sort of risk mitigation practice that clients are following in terms of this level. So, interesting example over there, Matt.
Yeah, thank you, Ashley. We can move to this next slide. And also we laid out suggested stakeholders as well. And just as summarizing, the activities we defined in the previous slide in terms of suggested cadences. So in terms of our research, we identify cadences as strategic, business critical, tactical in this example. So operational reviews, as we defined in the previous slide, could be anywhere, as I said, weekly to biweekly. So this really aligns with what I illustrated in the previous slide. But this is good reference material for you to go back and look within your organization today and say, hey, are we doing these activities today? Do we have a formalized structure in place to figure out which vendors we should be having these activities with? As we've identified the different tiering here with these vendors, and do we actually have evidence that we're performing these activities? And we'll talk about some of the technology tools as well that can help with the initial risk assessment, supplier segmentation, as well as tracking adherence to these activities as well, especially in center-led programs where you may have the business leads executing these functions. So tracking and managing compliance to the program could be useful with that tool. So we can move to the next slide.
All right.
All right, so I'm going to talk about our call to action.
Great. So, this is actually an offer for all of you attendees over here today for this webinar. What we want to give to you is complimentary access to any one of these two reports. So, we've posted the link on the chat. Do click on it. What you can do is you can select which report you will find more interesting, and then we'll send you a copy of it. And also a follow-up conversation with our analysts. That's always an option, right? If you want to discuss your key priorities across any of these areas. Small description of each of these reports. The first one is really about dwelling deep into what we're discussing today, right? So it's talking about your org structure of the VMO, where should you be placed? It's talking about roles and responsibilities, technology, giving you examples of various tools, what are the capabilities you should be building, and so on and so forth. Basically, a deep dive of what we're discussing as of now. And the second one, it's a slightly different topic, but we wanted to put it in because we know this is also important for VMOs. It's talking about the supplier portfolio strategy. So, how are your peers thinking about the supplier portfolios? Are they consolidating their vendor base? Are they rationalizing it? Are they sort of diversifying it? Are they adding specialists to the mix? And what are the reasons or what are the trends that are leading them in that direction? So that's the second report. We're sharing a lot of trends in this around portfolio strategies, and you can choose either of these reports and a conversation with us. So do click the link on the chat, and you'll get access to the CTA. All right. Now, with that, I would like to hand it over to Shatakshi because she's going to share how you can augment your VMO capabilities with technology today.
Yeah. Thanks, Vanushi. So before I start with why there is a need to augment VMO with tech, I would like to first discuss what organizations who aren't leveraging tech in their VMO, what are the challenges they are grappling with. So what we have typically seen in such organizations is that a major challenge which they now face is a real lack of visibility. Like they don't know when a risk incident has already taken place. They know when the situation has already occurred, when a performance miss has already taken place. They do not know which suppliers, relationships they need to prioritize, which are the ones they need to monitor more, which are the ones which will deliver more value in terms of innovation, in terms of them uh, leveraging AI more effectively in terms of driving more business outcomes. So they really don't know which are those suppliers which they need to focus more on, and what are the uh, how frequently do they need to monitor each of these supplier bases? So it is very important for them to first rationalize for and to rationalize that it is very important for them to monitor these suppliers more frequently and not on a periodic review basis. Of course, that is needed, but what is also needed and what is equivalent to that is ongoing and continuous monitoring. So, I would like to re-emphasize that visibility is one of the main problems which organizations today are facing. And in this current environment, when policy shifts is not just a one-time thing which happens once a year, it happens more and more frequently. In a month, you get like three major policy updates, which is like a big thing. So when these changes are becoming more frequent, the gaps in visibility and the real-time insights becomes all the more pronounced. And that is why VMO leaders are even taking a look at it. So what these organizations are really doing is they're taking a step back and they're assessing where they stand today in terms of leveraging technology to augment their already existing capabilities. We're not saying rip and replace. We are saying how are you currently leveraging technology? So we can move to the next slide, and now we'll ask all of you to take a step back and assess where you are today. How are you leveraging tech? Are you tech enabled? You have a proper solution in place, all the best in class tools you have, or are you partially enabled, like you have 50 to 70% of the processes you have? For that you have select point solutions, and for others you're still relying on manual processes, or you have or you're still leveraging, or you're still thinking about tech investments. So let's see where you are. And uh, I can see a lot of emphasis being laid on partially enabled, so organizations have started thinking about it. Uh, okay.
Shatakshi, I wonder if people are just taking the middle path here. That, oh, we're not that bad, but we're not that good. So let's just select the middle option over here. But
Yeah.
it's just interesting to
I
see.
I wish we had the percentage range, right? 10%, if it's 10%, if it's 50%, if it's 70%, how much it is.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess we are through with it. And a lot of people say that they're partially enabled. They have their core processes, although few select core processes are manual, but they do have selective point solutions for that. I wonder, I could ask which for what processes and everything are they currently leveraging, but it's good to see that organizations are thinking about it, and hence all the more the information we'll share in the next slide becomes more important. So we can move to the next slide. Yeah. So, but in our assessment, a lot of organizations weren't that mature in leveraging tech. And we have consistently observed that tech leverage has been in vendor management organizations is still at a fairly nascent stage of maturity. Uh, I can give you an example that like performance is tracked, but it is tracked using a spreadsheet based scorecard, which is manually updated by analyst on or a vendor manager on an ongoing basis, maybe bi-weekly, maybe monthly, but that's a manual spreadsheet which is getting filled in by them. Also, these risk review meetings, they occur only when there's a significant change which has taken place, or it happens during periodic review meetings. So what I've earlier said, I like to re-emphasize that ongoing monitoring, whether it's risk monitoring, whether it's performance monitoring, or to come to the very basic point of it, that having a single unified record, supplier record, that okay, I have 1,000 suppliers I'm dealing with, and these are my top 10% suppliers who I need to monitor on an ongoing basis. So many of these organizations do not even have that orchestrated unified data record in place. So, and since the data records are not there in place, it becomes all the more difficult for them to stratify suppliers in terms of how much value each of these suppliers is delivering them. So, again, re-emphasizing that all the more your bandwidth, VMO's bandwidth remains stuck in ongoing, monitoring things on a manual basis, and that is where we feel technology has a lot to offer. Uh, we can move to the next slide and see what leading organizations are doing to move towards the tech-enabled part of it. Because what we are now observing with leading organization is that there is shift towards a more digital tech-enabled, or I should say tech-augmented VMO. They are looking for ways to standardize processes because unless and until you have a set process in place, it is very difficult to augment it with tech because you really do not know, okay, this is the part which is set to be replaced by tech, and this is my workflow, this is how it is going to get hampered. So obviously having those standardized processes is very important. Then identifying the real use cases where you want to where you want to get tech into place. For those particular use cases, what we have seen is that risk management solutions, supply data management solutions, performance management solutions, orchestration solutions, all are getting a lot of importance when it comes to managing VMO related processes, so that VMO can focus more on driving strategic business outcomes, which has always been the number one priority of VMOs. And these operational bottlenecks have been sort of holding the VMOs back from realizing maximum potential. And that's what we have seen in organizations. So as these things will become more clearer, there's a hope that supplier relationships will be more in a place to drive business outcomes. We can move to the next slide to see what use cases vendor management organizations are prioritizing, and you can see that while AI adoption within vendor management, supply management is still relatively low today, but its potential and the breadth of use cases that are starting to emerge is really huge. So crossing across sourcing support, risk management, governance, contract management, performance management, vendor innovation, we have seen AI is able to bring in more personalized insights and is already providing a lot of cognitive assistance to vendor management professionals. But as I've earlier mentioned, that rather than replacing existing processes, these capabilities are more to augment how the vendor management teams work. So helping them suppose create an RFX in a record time. I mean, we were uh, gauging how much time it takes, and we have typically how much cycle time reduction do adopting these solutions uh, tends to offer. And we have seen that most of the time it's approximately 30 to 40% reduction in the cycle time. And that is a lot to offer. When you save 50% on your bandwidth, you can obviously utilize that or those for more strategic activities. So yeah, and earlier risk prediction, smarter contract analysis, automated performance tracking, identifying innovation opportunities earlier and capitalizing on that. So although organizations are in early stages, it is clearly an area where AI is materially enhancing a lot of visibility, decision making, and outcomes. And not to forget, agents are also here. So you can have a vendor onboarding agent to onboard your vendors. You can have a vendor data validation agent, which can actually validate whether your vendors are entering data right. So you don't have to go and manually check, okay, they have entered correct data. You already have an agent in place to do those tasks. So yeah, you have to keep an eye on the agents because they are also ready to dominate the space. Not dominate, but there are emerging use cases which we have seen here also, and I mean, reiterating on the efficiency, of course, cycle time reduction, cost savings, you have spent more time on your hand to improve the supplier relationships. The outcomes, decisions are more data driven. You have improved visibility. You already know, okay, this is my plan B if this particular incident takes place. So you're not waiting for that incident to happen to you and then you react on it. You are proactive and you already have a plan B in place, and you also might have a plan C or D. So that's how these solutions can deliver to you. And we can move on to the next slide to see what how the market typically looks like, and how you all can operationalize your vendor management capabilities. So what we see in the market today is a fairly diverse solution landscape. On one end, we have broad-based S2P suites that offer end-to-end coverage around sourcing, contract management, supplier performance and risk management, innovation. And these tend to work well for organizations that are pretty earlier in their digital transformation journey and are looking to consolidate data and processes in one place under one roof. And they do not want to spend a lot on n number of solutions. They just want that one broad-based solution in place so that you have the aggregate data, and then they can always go ahead and think about, okay, this is one area where I need to focus more, and then I can go for a best of breed solution. So this is one way in which organizations generally think about it. Another way is can I can start with best of breed solutions that, okay, all my processes are set, but not all of it I want to automate. I first want to go to the market and try a point solution for, say, contract management, and later we can see how our team is reacting to it, how what efficiency gains we have achieved so far, and accordingly we can go and decide whether we want to invest more in other point solutions or we want to invest in a broad-based S2B suite. So that said, obviously, it's generic that S2P suites will at times lack depth in specific supply management activities. So it's also not just investment decisions which organizations are taking. They're also looking at whether they want to focus on depth or they want to go with the breadth first. So in practice, organizations do follow a hybrid approach, as we have seen. They often go with both of these solutions, and more often we have seen that they have a S2P suite in place and then they go for best of breed solutions to double down on a particular supply management activity. Yeah. So I'll can move to the next slide, and I'll hand it over to Matt.
Sure. So what we're going to do in terms of just walk you through the study project we recently did with a large payments company in terms of helping them operationalize their VMO. So just in terms of some broader context, right? So this organization was on the brisk of a major journey to really drive savings across their organization. So they've launched several multiple work streams partnering with Everest to help them with their application services outsourcing, their business process outsourcing, as well as their infrastructure as well. And we also looked at their global capability centers, which they also currently had in India, to help optimize and really figure out how those organizations should be structured, what roles should be in the GCCs, what should be onshore, and what should be with vendor resources as well. So in terms of one of the work efforts, with that, we help them stand up and mature their vendor management capabilities across the organization. So as they were going to market, putting new contracts and transitioning with suppliers across those various verticals, they were going to receive the anticipated value they expected. There were significant transition efforts involved in terms of transitioning vendors, which was tied to the savings. And there was lots of ancillary improvements as well in terms of AI and other efficiencies that were baked into these agreements that this customer needed to ensure they had resources to manage those efficiencies proactively to hold the suppliers accountable to ensure they got the anticipated benefit. So some of the things that we saw, in terms of working with them was fragmented supplier management. This organization did have a third-party risk management program. It was primarily focused more from a compliance perspective of doing initial risk assessments, identifying, types of data that was provided with the provider, business impact from a continuity perspective, but it didn't go as far in terms of, looking at the program itself and identifying the performance management capabilities that should be layered on top of some of those traditional risk roles. So one of the things we did was marry the risk components and the performance management components through one standard assessment and operationalize that across the organization. So together with the governance forums that we showed you in the prior slides, we also helped them operationalize those governance forums, standardize their review cadences, and move to a standard supplier structure. And then in the other work stream efforts that we worked on with them, cross applications, infra, we helped them get best-in-class SLAs in those contracts by leveraging our benchmarking data and proprietary information that we have, as they were going to market. We helped them with the go-to-market effort in terms of knowing what to ask these suppliers in those RFP documents, and then also did contract reviews with them to help negotiate the right metrics in the contract itself, along with negotiation support from Everest. Second, in terms of, we identified there was unclear ownership accountability. They had some vendor management roles in the organization, some decentralized activities occurring. We did a current state analysis, identified all of those, current gaps, pain points, valued leakage within the organization, and helped identify, clear organization structure, which resulted in a center-led function. We laid out all of their strategic suppliers actually being managed within the sourcing and procurement function itself, with dedicated vendor managers reporting into the category leads, and then tier 2 vendors and below being managed within the business functions themselves, governed by a COE function and an investment in technology tools that Satakshi had showed in previous slides to help administer and manage adherence of those vendor management activities in a consistent data-driven manner. The other thing we saw in terms of the technology leverage data quality, they had inherent risk assessment tool. They didn't have the performance management activities, like I said, tied together with that. So one of our things we helped them with is get to one system to do the supplier segmentation and track performance and risk due diligence activities in one platform, so that they can track those activities and ensure the suppliers are adherent, across both interests in terms of operationalizing those vendor management risk and performance criteria. In terms of tracking SLAs, they were, some of the platforms on their roadmap that we suggested were further investments they were going to make towards automating SLA adherence with suppliers, creating more customized dashboards and reporting across the suppliers. But obviously, in terms of their roadmap and journey, they started with getting the base risk assessment and due diligence tracking platform in place, and then moving further upstream towards some of those tools in terms of managing the performance, tracking, and collaboration type activities with suppliers. So one of the things we also had to help them with was size the VMO, help them figure out what the headcount should be, what the investments were going to be within the headcount based on their salaries, bands, and ranges, and then also what the ROI was of the VMO. And a lot of times I see organizations struggle. We see organizations struggle in terms of quantifying ROI. So what we did, since we had a very tangible use case in terms of the same were driven from these 3 work streams, was I really identified, based on our estimates and our research, what we saw as the value leakage percentage if they did not drive the VMO. So we estimated across between 12 to 24 million in value that was going to be preserved in terms of anticipated savings coming out of these engagements that would have ideally been lost or not received. The 12 million was direct savings. The taking up to 24 was additional savings and efficiencies they were expecting through AI, further supplier rationalization, and other performance and efficiency enhancements, which had some caveats in the contracts tied to the customer's operationalizing this correctly. So the VMO is going to help ensure and drive adherence towards those contractual obligations they had in those agreements. And obviously improve the risk visibility. Their risk program had good intent, but it only looked at certain aspects of risk. It didn't look at in terms of, hey, are we actually managing SLAs? Are we actually proactively meeting with our suppliers? Do we have the right relationship management cadences in place? So we helped them further really tie their third-party risk and performance management program together to really help ensure they were right-sizing the program and really reducing risk across the organization. And then we drove really towards clear ownership, governance, and technology roadmap in terms of how they should roll out the VMO, maturity effort, what stages they should do it in, and then how they should, and further invest in tech in years 2 and 3. And the other thing in terms of the outsourcing excellence membership they have with us, as they're going through this journey, this client has continued support from us. So as they're making changes to contracts or, deciding scope changes and understanding SLA or things that come up, they have ongoing support from us along the journey to help ensure that, things stay optimized in terms of where we left them off. So this was a consulting project we did with a particular client. We do projects like this with clients on top of our membership programs. So just another thing to think about in terms of also the benchmarking data that Everest offers in terms of all these services and infrastructure contracts that have high vendor lock-in and switching complexity that a benchmark can really help drive clarity in terms of what you should be paying, standardizing roles across all of your services contracts. So you have the right job family, also the right job family that's built for AI as roles change and evolve, and then ensuring that the constructs of these contracts are moving towards, not just labor-based, but also technology-based through automation and AI are constructed properly, have the right metrics, financial constructs and incentives and savings measurements and SLAs that align with best in class for the industry. So I'll pause there and I'll hand it off. I know we have 2 minutes left. I don't know if we have any other.
I know we have only 2 minutes left, and we've been trying to answer questions on the go, and we will, follow up with responses to the remaining questions as well. So don't worry, all your doubts will be addressed. We just quickly wanted to also show you, a glimpse of our next event. This is Engage London, and we're sort of having this event in London, but we also have a flagship event in Dallas, which is going to be later this year. Engage London is going to be in March 9 to 10th, Park Plaza, London Riverbank. Do register if you're interested and if you're in that region, or do reach out to us if you want to find out more details, right? We have people from sourcing, vendor management, all sorts of roles across GBS as well who are attending, and we're doing sessions on vendor management, we're doing sessions on procurement, AI, and driving value for GBS organizations, and so on and so forth. So if you're interested in that sort of thing, to register. We've also put in the link into the chat. All right. So I think we're only at a minute left, and what we can do is we can sort of close for today. I know that we wanted to leave some time for Q&A, but we will follow up for sure with all the remaining questions and try to answer most of your questions post this webinar. But thank you so much, everyone, for joining. I think this has been great, and the audience has been great, right? Thank you so much for being so engaged. Thank you for asking questions. Hope we're able to add more value to your day-to-day business, and we continue to add more value as we go along the way. And last but not the least, thanks Matt and Shatakshi for partnering on this and sharing the great insights that you have here.